Comme l'a dit Nelson Mandela, l'éducation est l'arme la plus puissante pour changer le monde. Pour les enfants les plus vulnérables, les réfugiés et les personnes déplacées par les conflits et les guerres, l'éducation est synonyme d'avenir meilleur pour eux, leur famille et leur communauté. C'est aussi souvent la première chose à être perturbée et la dernière à être rebâtie. C'est pourquoi le Canada lance la campagne Ensemble pour l'apprentissage, qui vise à ce que tous les enfants reçoivent l'éducation dont ils ont besoin et qu'ils méritent. Nous avons vu les effets de la COVID-19 qui a entraîné la fermeture d'écoles dans le monde entier et qui touche des millions d'élèves. Pour les enfants les plus vulnérables du monde, la fermeture des écoles entraîne la faim, le mariage précoce et forcé, la violence et une pauvreté encore plus grande. La campagne Ensemble pour l'apprentissage vise à bâtir un avenir meilleur, un avenir fondé sur l'inclusion et le respect, un avenir prometteur d'espoir pour les enfants qui en ont le plus besoin. Nous adopterons des approches innovantes en travaillant avec des partenaires à l'intérieur comme à l'extérieur des salles de classe. Nous apprendrons des jeunes, des femmes et des chefs des communautés et nous les écouterons raconter leurs expériences, soit comme réfugiés, soit comme communauté hôte de réfugiés. La campagne Ensemble pour l'apprentissage s'appuie sur l'engagement de longue date du Canada pour l'éducation. Chaque enfant, où qu'il vive, mérite d'avoir la chance d'apprendre.
Thank you all for being here today for the launch of our Together for Learning campaign. As Canada's Minister of International Development, I am proud to welcome you along with our co-host and civil society partner for this special day, the Canadian International Education Policy Working Group, represented today by World Vision Canada. The Together for Learning campaign will support global efforts to ensure that all refugee and forcibly displaced children and youth, as well as the children and youth in communities that host refugees, get the quality education they need and deserve. Everything starts with learning: prosperity, health, a sustainable environment, and social justice. Education for all, including girls, refugees, and forcibly displaced people, and other marginalized groups, is at the heart of Canada's international development efforts. Nous ne pouvons pas atteindre les objectifs de développement durable et honorer nos engagements au titre du Pacte mondial pour les réfugiés si nous ne répondons pas aux besoins urgents d'éducation et d'action humanitaire des enfants les plus vulnérables du monde. Les avantages de l'éducation vont au-delà de la salle de classe et améliorent le bien-être des communautés dans leur ensemble. Lorsqu'elles ont la possibilité de réussir, les réfugiés et les personnes déplacées de force peuvent non seulement contribuer aux efforts de consolidation de la paix et de reconstruction, mais leur perspective est essentielle à la réussite de ces efforts. It will take innovative approaches both inside and outside of classrooms to make sure refugee and forcibly displaced children don't fall behind. The development gains in education of the last decades depend on it. Innovative and inclusive, Together for Learning offers a future of hope for these children and youth. The campaign is built on 4 pillars: programming excellence, amplifying local voices, diplomatic engagement, and improving the quality, availability, and use of data so that we can make decisions based on evidence. Under the Programming Excellence pillar, we will build on Canada's Charlevoix Education Initiative, supporting women's rights organizations and promoting innovation and inclusion, especially in response to COVID-19. This could mean supporting low-tech solutions for remote learning, such as radio and printed learning materials, to reach learners who have little or no connectivity, and improving the quality and accessibility of digital and mobile learning platforms. In the pre-pandemic days, when it was safe to travel, I was privileged to visit the Democratic Republic of Congo, where I saw firsthand how radio can transform the lives of children and adolescents, particularly girls affected by conflict, to continue their education in a safe environment. It was old technology, radio, but used in an innovative way. It is in the same spirit of innovation that Canada will soon launch a call for concept notes that will bring together Canadian organizations and local actors in sub-Saharan Africa to promote change and education to benefit refugees and displaced children and youth, especially girls. The second pillar of the campaign, Amplifying Local Voices, will start with the creation of the Refugee Education Council. This council, established by civil society partners, will ensure that we hear and learn from youth, women, and community leaders about their own experiences, either as refugees, forcibly displaced persons, or as people living in communities that host them. I want to thank those council members who are here today for being a part of this vital campaign, and I look forward to engaging with you later in this program. Your voices, stories, and experiences will bring attention to the most important issues that need to be addressed. You will help us to shape this campaign and to make sure it achieves its goals. Diplomatic engagement, the third pillar, will be important as we ensure a successful launch of the campaign. And I want to thank those of you from the diplomatic community here today and let you know how much we look forward to working with you. This campaign cannot succeed without you and the support you can bring working with local governments. Canada's missions around the world will also work with local governments, local youth advocates, and community leaders, as well as multilateral partners and other education stakeholders to make sure all kids and youth get the education they deserve. We also hope you will amplify our messages and bring them to the forefront of national, regional, and global discussions on education for refugees and forcibly displaced children. And lastly, the campaign will include gathering and analyzing data so we can build an evidence base to guide our efforts and ensure their effectiveness. And with that, I'm pleased to be able to share a message from Alfonso Davies, an extraordinary Canadian who knows firsthand why this campaign matters. Alfonso Davies was born in a refugee camp in Ghana to Liberian parents. When he was just 5 years old, he and his family came to Canada. Like so many kids, between school, homework, family, and friends, there was soccer. But it became clear at a very young age that soccer was going to be a big part of Alfonso's life, and that Alfonso would be a big part of any soccer team he joined. Still a teenager, he played for Canada's national team, where he was the youngest player to ever score, and then he was off to Germany, where he now plays for FC Bayern Munich. Off the pitch, Alfonso is generously giving back as a UNHCR high-profile supporter to raise awareness and funds on behalf of refugees. And I am so happy we can hear from him today as we launch Together for Learning.
Today, Canada is launching a 3-year campaign called Together for Learning. This campaign supports education for refugees around the world. As a former refugee myself, I am very grateful for the help my family received and the opportunity it's opened up for me. All children have the right to a chance for a better future, including refugees. That starts with a quality education. Together, we can make sure no one is left behind.
Wow. Alfonso, thank you so much for sharing your story and the important work that you're doing. What an incredible inspiration. Talented, versatile, and a team player, Alfonso is someone we all want on our side. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, a very important part of the Together for Learning campaign will be the creation of a Refugee Education Council. This council, made up of developing country nationals representing youth, women, and community leaders, will help lead our work to ensure that the knowledge and experience of refugee children, youth, parents, and teachers are taken into account because they are the ones who know what will work best for their communities. It's an inclusive approach that offers hope and promises a new start for the children of the world who need it most. By listening to, learning from, and this is important, acting on the advice of refugee and forcibly displaced people, we will increase local capacity and make room for new and diverse ways of programming and delivering education. Let's watch this short video to find out more about the Refugee Education Council and the vital role it will play in ensuring refugee and forcibly displaced children and youth get the education they need and deserve.
The Global Refugee Education Council brings together refugee youth and youth from host communities to advise and inform Canada's Together for Learning Ensemble pour l'apprentissage campaign.
Hi, my name is Laura Barbosa. I'm originally from Colombia and living in Toronto, Canada.
My name is Istalin Abdi. I'm from Somalia and I'm a photographer.
Hi, my name is Mongera Christine. I'm a teacher working at the Kakuma refugee camp.
Mi nombre es Ivana Portillo, soy de Venezuela y estudiante.
Je m'appelle Navalou Pascaline, d'origine burkinabé.
La fille sur vos écrans répond au nom de Bikira Amdiatou, étudiante en deuxième année de gestion des ressources humaines.
مرحبا، أنا قيس غسان عبد الرزاق، عمري 24 سنة، من سوريا، دخلت الأردن عام 2013.
I am excited to join the Global Refugee Education Council because for the very first time, I'll be representing majority voices in the camp.
I'm excited to see what work we're able to do and what recommendations we'll provide to the Government of Canada to advance global refugee education.
And I will be playing my role in making lives better for refugees.
C'est pourquoi je m'engage à donner le meilleur de moi-même et à proposer des solutions sine qua non pour que ces réfugiés aient une éducation de qualité qui leur permette de s'épanouir.
I believe education is the gate where opportunities can be found and where people with challenges like all of us will have the chance to be heard and to speak.
We are the council.
That's terrific. Thank you. As you can see, we are in the very early days of the Council, and I want to give a special shout out to our members, Neil, Amelie, and Laura, today who have made time to join us and discuss some aspects of the important work that lies ahead. Originally from South Sudan and Ethiopia, Neil Deng moved to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya in 2010 after fleeing an armed attack on his village in Ethiopia. He heads the Refugee Youth Peace Ambassadors, a youth-led initiative in Kakuma that works towards promoting peaceful coexistence between different communities in the camp and empowering young people as peace builders and social entrepreneurs. He is also an education consultant for the Kakuma Innovation Lab School. He firmly believes that education is the key to a better and brighter future for refugees, their communities, and the communities that host them. Neil does a lot of advocacy work and public speaking on refugee issues. He has also been involved in a number of youth networks and initiatives, including the Global Changemakers, One Campaign Champions for East Africa, and Women Deliver Young Leaders program. Nous accueillons aussi aujourd'hui Amélie Fabien. Craignant la persécution après le génocide rwandais, Amélie et sa famille ont fui au Malawi, où elle a vécu comme réfugiée de l'âge de 6 à 18 ans. Elle est venue au Canada en 2014, où elle a étudié à l'Université McGill grâce au programme d'étudiants réfugiés de l'Entraide universitaire mondiale du Canada. Elle termine actuellement une maîtrise en politique publique et une maîtrise en affaires mondiales dans le cadre d'un programme de diplôme DUB entre Sciences politiques Paris et l'Université de Toronto. Amelie's main passion is education policy and its role in facilitating the inclusion of marginalized communities to reduce inequality. She previously conducted research for UNESCO and continues to pursue her passion for refugee education through advocacy with organizations such as WUSC. Through her volunteer and advocacy work, she is dedicated to education and helping more refugees and forcibly displaced youth obtain an education. We also have Laura Barbosa with us today. Laura was born in Colombia. When she was 12 years old, her mother was murdered by an illegal armed group and her father disappeared. She had to leave Colombia, her sister, and her family at the age of 18. Despite tragedy and challenging times, Laura was able to study and give back to her community. Laura has lived and studied in China and Malaysia, where she has worked as a teacher and with girls to promote gender equality, as well as refugee laws and programs. She volunteered in a community of refugee Myanmar children who were settling in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Laura wants to support youth communities to create safe and sustainable environments for youth facing forced displacements. She is passionate about community development and the importance of the United Nations SDGs. Thank you all for being here with me today and for accepting this important role. I'm so thrilled that the three of you could join me, and I'm hoping that as you introduce yourselves, you can also say where you're joining from as well. Each of you has proven strong leadership skills, and I hope you'll be frank and open in the advice you provide as members of the Refugee Education Council. I have to say that when I was reading all of your bios, I was just so unbelievably impressed with the incredible work and advocacy that each of you have taken on. So again, thank you so much. And I'm just thrilled to be having this conversation with you. I am open to all your questions today, but first let me start with a question for each of you. Why did you decide to join the Global Refugee Education Council? What are you hoping to accomplish? And if you can also just start with where you're calling in from today, that would be great. So how about we'll start with that and we'll go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Amélie and Laura and then Neil.
Great. Hi, very happy to be here. Happy to be part of the Education Council. I'm calling in from Montreal today, which is where I'm based. And to your question, Minister, why I joined the Global Refugee Education Council, first and foremost, it's because I'm interested in advancing refugee education from, my experience of being a refugee, knowing that a lot of people worked hard for me to get where I am. If I can extend that by lending my voice is something that I'm very honored to do. I have ideas on how Canada can do more to advance education on the global stage. And I'm grateful to have this space to share those ideas and debate them with people that bring very different perspectives to the table. And having some of those ideas translate into actual policy is something that I'm looking forward to working on. And I would also say that I'm very eager to learn from my peers who bring extremely different perspectives to this issue. We may share the experience of, being refugees or being displaced or being part of refugee hosting communities, but we are not a monolithic group. Each of us brings a very different perspective to the table. And I think that's what will inform this campaign of the government and make it responsive to the actual needs of refugee children around the world. So that's why I decided to join this council. I think I have something to offer, but also I have a lot to learn from other members in this council. Your second question, what I hope to achieve on this council, I really hope we are able to communicate the sense of urgency that I feel refugee education warrants. When young people are not able to visualize their future, it makes them lose hope. And going to school, I know for me, gave me things to look forward to stay positive and to stay hopeful. To this day, it's something that still works, which is probably why I keep going back to school. And just maybe, some statistics, because I love numbers. UNICEF estimates that nearly 50 million children have become refugees or have been forcibly displaced from their homes. So in my thinking, if we do not invest in their education, we risk losing an entire generation of future leaders, of future scientists, future artists. And I think that is a huge loss that should not happen before our eyes. So the way I see it, we have a responsibility to refugees. They do not have a government to approach to fulfill their human rights. They cannot go to the streets and strike and demand that their right to education be fulfilled. It takes, advocates to remember this plight of refugees, advocates like Laura and Neil, who are here today, and an able and willing government like the government of Canada to do something about it and hopefully inspire other donors to do the same, because I think refugee education warrants a sense of urgency that is not being given, especially for children. So that would be my answer.
Those are great reasons, Amelie, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. Laura?
Well, I'm happy to join the council. Thank you, everyone, for making this possible. Thank you, Amelie. Thank you, Niall. Thank you, Minister. I'm currently in Toronto, so I decided to join the Global Council because I think it's important to include the voices of refugees to break the stigmatization, such as refugees are poor, refugees are uneducated, because that's not what it is. Having to leave my country, I studied in China, I studied in Malaysia, I volunteer, I work, and then I came to Canada as a refugee. Gave me the opportunity to understand that educational opportunities are given, and if we have those opportunities, we can break with the cycle of poverty, not only creating resilience, but also empowering youth to believe and achieve their full potential. When we are given opportunities, I remember when I first came to Canada, and then I show my paper, my refugee paper, people will look at me like, oh my God, maybe she didn't study, maybe, she's uneducated. But when in fact I speak 3 languages, I have tons of experience in the working labor. And it makes me realize that we have this wrong conception about a refugee. That's not what we are. We just had to leave our countries and come to another country, but we have experience, we have education. We just need more opportunities to show who we really are and the potential that we have. And I hope to accomplish in this council is to use my experience and knowledge to help the government of Canada create more education programs and policies that are responsive to the needs of most vulnerable people. Right now, I'm working in an organization where we support 75 Mayan indigenous people in Guatemala, not people, boys and girls. 60% of them are girls and 40% are boys, and we'll help them with tablets, platforms where they can, have access to educational content, because we are talking about areas where we don't have even access to the internet. And so just being part of that program and being part of this council make me realize that I have the chance to change something that I wanted to change my whole life. And also because I'm going to learn with Amelie, with Niall. I mean, it's such a great opportunity that not only I can provide the little I know, but also that I'm going to learn tons.
Oh, that's great, Laura. I love that about what you said about breaking down the stigma and misconceptions. I often talk to people about when we think of refugees, we're just thinking about people like us who've had to flee their homes for no reason of their own making. So I think that's just terrific. How about you, Neil? How come you decided to join the council?
Thank you so much, Minister. I'm so glad to be part of this incredible group of young refugees who are advocating for their community. My name is Neil Deng. I'm tuning in from Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where I've been living for the last 10 years. And I fled my country when I was very young, at 11 years old. And I remember that journey. It took me 2 weeks from Western Ethiopia, where my father settled after fleeing Sudan civil war, to Kenya. When I arrived in Kakuma refugee camp, I was lost, I was devastated, I was frustrated. But something significant I remember is that during my first few days in school, I was not able just to find learning at the school, but I was able to find a place of solace where I was able to trauma over my trauma. And that helped me today to become an advocate for my community and to also become change maker in my community. And one thing I see about a school for every refugee child is that it's not just a place where they can go and learn, but it's a place where they can go and forget about their past. It is a place where they can go and forget about, what they experience and instead think about a brighter future. And the main reason I joined the council is that I believe there can never be an effective solution without the community that have been affected. And I think if we talk about refugees, we need to change how we do that. I think we need to talk more of the refugees and not more about refugees, because this is what is happening now. We have these big conferences, where people talk more about refugees. That has to change. We need to talk more about the refugees, because they understand the experiences well. They understand what best can work for them well. So I believe if young refugees like myself, like Emily, like Laura are in this table, working together with you, I believe we are able to, to act more effective solution that can help us, respond to the growing refugee crisis. And what I hope to accomplish is that I hope to see that in the coming years, the work of your office and the work of the government of Canada and your allies is informed by the voices of the refugees, by the voices of the community you serve. I hope to accomplish, being able, not just to speak by myself, but to speak for young refugees in Kakuma who might not have access to this platform, making sure that their voices are heard, making sure that their voices are included in decision-making processes, and making sure that they are, on the driving seat. They're not just participants, but they're active, players. Making sure that, they have a say in every decision, about issues that affect them. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, thank you to the three of you, because this is exactly why having a council of young, made up of diverse refugees is so important to hear your voices. Because I think, as each of you said, it's not about making decisions, about you or about refugees without hearing you. And, I share that passion. I'm the granddaughter of refugees who, my grandfather and my grandmother had to stop their education. They were teenagers, when World War II broke out, and they never did get a chance to return to that. And so it's always been so important in my family to have those opportunities. And I'm so thrilled and I'm so proud that I get to be part of this council with you, because I know that I'm going to learn probably more from you than anything else. And so I'm really delighted, and I think each of you are going to bring so much to this role. I'm hoping that I can now ask you to tell me a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected youth in your community, and more specifically how the pandemic, how you've seen it had a disruption on education. I just want to go back to Neil's point about education, about it not just being about learning, but about being a place of solace and a place where you can forget about the trauma and where you can think about hope for the future. Amélie was talking about not losing out on a generation of potential leaders and scientists and teachers, for example, but it's also about having that sense of a safe place. And so I'm wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, and maybe this time we'll go in reverse order. So starting with Neil, Laura, and then Amélie, if that's okay. So over to you, Neil.
Thank you so much, Minister. I'm so glad, to be sitting here with you today and to be able to speak to you. I think that is a great opportunity. Learning that, you also originally come, from a refugee background. I think that's something incredible, to have you sitting in that office. So I hope, you'll be able to bring more refugee voices to your office and make sure your work is informed by their voices. I've lived in Kakuma refugee camp for 10 years, and I've been doing a lot of project in education. And as I said earlier, education provide, not just a place of learning, but a place of solace. And when, COVID-19 hit the camp, the first thing that, happened was that there was a lot of fear. The communities feel that, this is now coming to kill all of us. The health system in the camp are very weak. There's very limited access to information. And when the school closed, the infrastructure, the education infrastructure in the camp is very poor, where we have, 100 children sitting in one classroom with one teacher. You don't have access to a computer or a smartphone where you can go and continue learning at home. Your teacher doesn't have access to a smartphone that they can keep, supplying information to students at home. People live in a very close proximity where, homeschooling was very hard because you have like 20 people in a single compound. And that is something I experienced, at every single community I was able to visit. It wasn't easy for education to continue going on at home. And, that put many young refugees that I know who are students, who are almost, getting out of trauma, going back to that journey again, because they feel their future is now going away in front of them, given that you don't have that opportunity to be able to continue education, which is the only thing that gives you hopes, to look toward a brighter future.
Thanks, Neil, for painting such a poignant picture as to why education is so important and why we need to do everything that we can to ensure its continuity, even in difficult times like this. So thank you for sharing that. Laura?
Yeah, okay. Countries like Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Guatemala, we had pre-existing educational issues. We have illegal groups in Colombia forcing millions of children move to the cities that they are not prepared to welcome to these children, right? Now we have millions of people from Venezuela coming to Colombia, coming to Peru, coming to different Latin American countries. And the countries like Colombia, like Guatemala, like Peru, we don't have the system to support the newcomers or the displaced people to our countries. So due to COVID-19, this has increased actually. We don't have access to the internet. Most of the areas, rural areas, we don't have access to internet. We don't have platforms, educational platforms, computers, laptops. Now we are just emphasizing on, okay, the little we have, we give it to the richer. And we don't really support the poor people, the children, the displaced youth, and that's what's happening right now in Latin America. And many of these children, they are missing their year, the school year, because okay, it's either I study or I work in whatever I can work, selling candies or perhaps gardening or in the farms, whatever they have to. Sometimes in Colombia, I know it's a fact that for instance, the legal groups, they are taking youth and children to fight for them because that's the only choice they have. And so we are talking about 12 years old boys and girls taking arms to kill people because that's what the legal groups are doing right now. And some of the issues, as I said before, we don't have internet access in the rural areas, in the poor areas, and even in the cities, if we have access to it, the children, they have to work for their families. We don't have even teachers capable of using virtual platforms because we are talking about digital literacy, people who had to move from their own places, who were used to do gardening or grow things or living in farms. Now they have to come to a city where everything is different and they don't have that knowledge to use those platforms. So that will be some of the issues that we are facing in our countries, pre-existing and after COVID-19.
Thank you, Laura. I think you raised such good points about access to technology. And I think building off of the points that Neil was saying, that school represents a safe place for children. And not having access to school can sometimes lead children to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. So thank you for sharing that. Over to you, Amélie.
Sure. I think I'm really just echoing what Neil and Laura have already said. When COVID-19 hit, I was, in university. We took a week off, and within a week, we had transitioned to online schooling. And in those moments, I remember thinking about refugee children and knowing that access to digital tools was not an option, and just wondering to what extent their education is being disrupted, and also we know from stories that have been shared by other refugees and research for that matter, actually, that shows that prolonged absence from school affects the student's ability to catch up. And crucially, and I think what scares me the most, it reduces their probability of returning to school. And so that part is scary and should ring alarms in us, really, to do whatever we can to make sure children go back to school. Another thing that I think we downplay in relation to school is what has been mentioned already, is how it provides protection to children. This is both physical and psychological. I remember most primary schools in Malawi, for example, offer 1 to 2 meals. For some children, this can be the only nutritious meal they have that day. Being in school also protects them from potentially abusive parents or guardians who are themselves going through their own mental struggles that have been exacerbated by the situations that they find themselves in. And for girls, being in school reduces the chances of being sexually abused. And so COVID-19 is exacerbating a lot of these issues, and we have to do our best to make sure children go back to school. It has to be something that is urgent. Not necessarily waiting to see the effects of what being out of school for that long is going to take. We cannot take that chance. It should be a priority. I don't even know what other words to use there. Like, really, we need to do our best to make sure kids go back to school as soon as possible.
Amélie, I think you use the best words. It should be a priority. It needs to be a priority. And I think the point that you highlighted about reducing the likelihood of going back to school is one of the things that, quite frankly, keeps me up at night. And certainly one of the things that as Canada, we have put a focus on in our response to COVID-19. While we obviously have to deal with the health emergency, but we can't forget about education, and we can't forget about the impacts that not being in school has on children. And Amélie, your points maybe lead into my next question, which are, what are the most pressing issues facing forcibly displaced youth, especially girls, when it comes to education? What do we need to do to remove those barriers? And we know that boys who are out of school are more vulnerable to recruitment and to forced labor or gangs. So what should we be doing in terms of priorities to get everyone back into school? And what can we do? How about Laura? Do you want to kick this off, and then maybe Amélie and then Neil?
Well, thank you, Minister, for that question. I actually believe that long-term disruptions to education carries enormous consequences. One of them increasing poverty, gender inequality, hunger, and increasing inequality worldwide. We need to do everything we can to make sure that all youth, especially marginalized youth, have access to learning environments. That said, I want to bring an example or a story that I had. I believe girls and youth are not aware of family planning methods, thus early pregnancy. Because of early pregnancy, girls and women are performing the majority household work. And this is because of cultural barriers. For example, when I was volunteering in Malaysia, 10 of my students, I had a total of 10 students. 9 of them were boys, and we only had 1 girl. So the rest of the women and females who were at this refugee center, Myanmar center, living in Kuala Lumpur, they were actually performing the household work, cleaning, cooking, taking care of their babies. So that says a lot about the gender inequality that we are facing right now, especially due to COVID. It has increased even more, and they have less opportunities to actually study and to be the person they want to be in the future.
Thank you so much for that, Laura. I think you detailed really well some of the challenges. Amélie, do you want to add anything on to that?
Sure. I think Laura has really touched on one of the pressing problem that girls face in accessing education. I think what I would add to that, I perceive one of the most pressing problems to be the lack of prioritization of girls' learning, whether this is by families or teachers or the community who do not see this as a worthwhile investment. And it becomes very apparent when you're in a classroom, because the ratio of boys to girls is very disproportionate. The gender gap at the moment stands at 10 to 8 for boys to girls in primary school. And when you go to secondary school, it's about 10 to 7. And we know that this gap widens the higher up you go in education. To overcome this barrier, I think outreach can go a long way. A simple solution such as having a community leader in the refugee camps, going into homes that they're familiar with, that have girls of school age, just going there to sort of convince the parents or the guardians to send these girls to schools. I think another way of overcoming this barrier is sharing stories, successful stories of refugee girls who've completed their education, are contributing to their community. Hopefully, when people are able to visualize what an education can do for their child or for their students, they're able to invest more in them. So for me, I think I perceive the biggest barrier to be the lack of prioritization of girls' education.
Oh, thank you, Amélie. I think you raised some really important points and some of the statistics that we also need to understand as we're making these decisions. Neil, do you want to talk a little bit about your perspective and maybe some of the barriers facing boys as well?
Yeah, sure. I think Emily and Laura, talk about most of the point. I think something that's really significant, which I think is great that, the government of Canada is wishing to put this council together, is that, there's often a lack of lens of, or underrepresentation of gender in planning about education. I think it's significant that, when we come together to plan about education or educational project, we have to put into place, that the challenges facing boys and the challenges facing girls are not the same. There's need to have a gender lens, when you plan about anything concerning education. coming to challenges facing girls, just to highlight a few points that, Amelie and Laura also talk about. I think one thing that also faced young girls, and I've seen that in the camp, is that, there's like lack of, better infrastructure at the school, being sanitation facilities, which put girls at home. This is a big challenge. I've been to Kakuma Refugee Secondary School, where I went to for my high school, and we have like few toilets, which sometimes girls and boys are forced to share the same toilet, making it even harder for young girls to go to school. There's like limited access to sanitation facilities, so I think that is making it hard for girls to be at the school. The other challenge as well is social and cultural norms, and I think it's good Emily talk about community engagement program that bring together community leaders, religious leaders, and parents, and making sure they work all hand in hand to make sure girls go to school. And the point about sharing successful stories of girls, I think is really important. When it comes to mentorship, I think it's give a young girls hope. When they see someone like Emily, being able to be on a platform like this, they see themselves in us. So I think there's need to be able to bring to the spotlight more young refugee girls, and looking on the other hand as well, when it comes to challenges facing boys, I think something similar kind of seen in the camp, or even in areas affected by armed conflict, is that young boys are often very they are targets of of extremist groups. So I think when there is no much investment in education, making sure that the education surrounding are safe for boys, that make it really easy for extremist group to be able to recruit these boys, because they see no future in the school. There's no better investment in the school, so they're easily prone to be recruited into extremism group. And also other challenge as well. I think poverty play a key role in young boys going to school. Sometimes are forced to go and work, to go and find work, so that you can support your family. Because your father has nothing, your mother has nothing. They don't have enough money to buy you books, to buy you school uniform. So that put you in a difficult situation where you are forced to go and find work so that you can support your family as well.
Thank you for that, all three of you. I mean, I think that was actually a very powerful message that you shared. And the fact that there are differences, for example, making sure that there are separate washrooms, having those dialogues with parents and community leaders, and making sure that trauma-informed gender balance is applied for refugee and displaced children is super important. So thank you so much for that. So we're going to get to our final question, which actually is just me asking you if you have any questions for me. So let's start with Neil, Amélie, and then Laura. Neil?
Thank you so much, Minister. I'm so glad to be here and to be able to converse with you today on behalf of, young refugees in Kakuma and also in Kenya, and, also across the world. My question, is that, I would like to learn, how best, the government of Canada is working, to make sure that it's not just the government of Canada that work around refugee education, but actually, bringing together your allies, other countries, other, educational institutions, to come together and work with refugees and make sure that, refugees, actually, present in those tables, making sure decisions are not, made on their behalf. So I want to know, what mechanisms are in place to make sure, this engagement continues, and to make sure, other, countries and institutions are coming on board as well.
Oh, it's an excellent question. And that's precisely why we're launching the Together for Learning campaign, because we want this to be a global initiative, and we want to bring other governments on board, both other donor governments as well as partner governments that host refugees, because we recognize that this is an issue that we all need to be working on together. And it's precisely why the Refugee Education Council is so important, to make sure that your voices and the voices of refugees are represented and not just heard, but most importantly, listen to and inform the work that we're doing. And that's also why one of the pillars of this is diplomatic engagement. So working with other countries to keep moving this agenda forward. A shout out, of course, to the diplomats who are tuning in today to make sure that they're listening, but also bringing this message back to their home countries, because we're looking for partners. We really believe that this is an important global campaign to get underway. So thank you so much, Neil, for that question. And I'm hoping that this is the first of a successful series of events to keep raising these issues and moving the needle forward. Amélie, any questions from you?
Sure. I am wondering, what is the challenge that you face both here at home and abroad when you're trying to advance the refugee education agenda? And is there a way that youth advocates can help in that sense?
Another excellent question, Amélie. I think the biggest challenge is explaining to people why it matters, why we should care, and why we should not only care, but actually work to ensure that refugees and displaced children around the world have access to education. I mean, for me, it's very clear. But I think to get that message out to the broader public is really important. I think that advocates and activists like you have such a huge role to play. Because going back to the beginning as to why you wanted to do this, I think that's a clear message to get out to people, to break down the stigma about what it is to be a refugee, to talk about what it means to give people who have had to leave their homes because of violence, because of conflict, an opportunity to give back to their community, to succeed and to pursue their dreams. And what that means, and I think each of you showing what you're doing not only serves the purpose of inspiring other displaced children, but also showing the broader community about what it means to be a refugee and what you're able to do and what you're able to give back. So I think that the three of you and others have such an incredible role to play in talking to the broader public about why refugee education matters so much. So I think it was a really good question. Laura, yours?
We know that worldwide, some of the times when we propose or when we have this type of councils is to offer our experience and opinions and how we can solve all these issues that we are facing worldwide. So my question would be, is it something that we are willing to take action on, not just words or, that image of, here we have the council to represent everyone around the world, to represent youth and refugees around the world, but more like, this council is a council that is willing to take action and to really help those who really need from us.
I hope so. I mean, that's like the point of having the council, is to really make sure that your voices are informing the policy and programming that we're going to be doing as a government. But then also to make sure that you are representing people around the world who are living in situations of displacement. So I really hope that this is about providing advice, experience, but also about action, because I think that it's really important. And I hope that this council, as you've all said, provides learning in a two-way fashion. It's something that is about engagement. It's about learning from each other. It's about learning from the work that we're all doing and actually moving the needle forward, making sure that we're providing quality education to all refugee and displaced children. That's the ultimate objective, and galvanizing support here in Canada, but right around the world for what I think is a really, really important issue. Great. Well, that wraps up our conversation. Can I just say a huge thank you to the three of you for finding some time in your lives, to make time for this conversation. And I'm just really grateful to have your voices and your leadership as part of the Refugee Education Council. And I think if anyone can see who is watching, we're very fortunate to have your leadership join us on the council. And we're all going to learn a lot. We're going to do lots of really hard and important work, and it's really wonderful that each of you have decided to join us. I'm looking forward to the work ahead, and I'm going to learn so much from the three of you. So again, a big thank you. Take care, stay safe, and I'm so thrilled that you could join us today.
Minister, thank you for making this a priority as well, and for fighting for refugees. I know it cannot be easy with all the political rhetoric around this issue. So thank you for also doing your part.
Thank you.
I will say just muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Minister, for making sure our voices are heard and actually, part of the decision-making process.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. It's so, so important. So thank you again. Now for the next part of our program. We will listen to important partners and colleagues from civil society. All of us who are committed to education and working in partnership on issues of international development know that we would not be able to achieve anything without the essential contributions of civil society organizations. Each with their own purposes, priorities, and capacities, these important organizations bring valuable and unique experiences that help us achieve more effective results, offer new ideas, build local capacity in places around the world, and importantly, engage with Canadians as global citizens. Joining me today is Michael Messenger from World Vision Canada and Christine Mwangira from Kenya, where she works as a teacher. Both are here today to comment on what they have heard about Together for Learning and from our event today. A lawyer, lifetime advocate for the world's most vulnerable children, and a marathon runner as well, Michael knows how important it is to go the distance so that all children can achieve their potential. Christine can share with us her views from the vantage point of being a teacher in a community that hosts refugees. She has rich experience as a community mobilizer, helping girls and young women stay in school or go back to school if they have had to leave.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Messenger from World Vision, and we are so glad to be part of this event and the Together for Learning Ensemble pour l'apprentissage initiative. I want to start by expressing appreciation to Emily, Neil, and Laura for participating in the council and for taking part in the conversation today. We look forward to your continued fantastic contributions. Thanks for pushing all of us too. I also want to say thank you to Minister Gould for making this a reality and for your personal commitment to this issue. The Global Refugee Education Council strongly builds on Canada's commitments that were made in 2018 at the G7 Summit, especially the Charlevoix Declaration. By helping to amplify the voices of those affected by global decision-making in efforts to close gaps in access to quality education and unlock the enormous potential of forcibly displaced women and girls. At World Vision, we are proud to come alongside the other members of the Canadian International Education Policy Working Group, and we look forward to working with and learning from the Council as they harness their knowledge, share their lived experience to help strengthen Canada's commitments and decisions and policies to promote quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for refugees and for other forcibly displaced and host community children and youth. Over the years in my role, I've had the privilege to visit and meet lots of children in displacement or refugee settings in Central African Republic, Myanmar, Uganda, Jordan, Afghanistan, just to name a few. When we go and visit these places, it's my goal to help capture stories and videos so that we can amplify the voices of these children who are affected by the situation, their lack of education, their concerns, their hopes and dreams, and bring it back and share it with Canadians. I'm excited about the fact that this Refugee Council goes one step further. We are actually having the children and the youth, especially the girls, sit around the table with us, participate in the decisions. Together, we can help ensure that displaced girls and boys have equitable access to education and true representation in decisions that impact them. Thanks once again for being part of this. We're excited about continuing this journey as we launch this council and this initiative. And now it's my privilege to pass it over to another member of the Refugee Education Council, Christine Mwangira in Kenya.
Thank you, speakers, for this opportunity. My name is Mwangira Christine from Kenya, working at the Kakuma refugee camp as a teacher. Every day when I'm working, I see my learners go through a lot of challenges and they work under very severe circumstances. For example, most of the learners are congested in their classrooms. Majority face trauma due to the challenges they have faced in life and the countries where they come from. Also, as days go by, we have very few learners in our classrooms, especially the girls, due to harmful cultural practices. I think education is one of the things can really change a person's life. I feel terrible when I see the challenges they go through, especially because they have a lot of potential. I am excited that the Canadian government is getting involved into improving the education of the refugees. Also, I'm happy they took the initiative of having a council, especially of people who already have an experience with the refugees. Thank you.
Many thanks to Michael, Christine, Neil, Amélie, and Laura for being with me to host this event and for all the hard work they do on behalf of the children in the world who need it most. Now, it is my privilege today to have the last word. I would like to thank you all for your participation in this launch and for engaging in the Together for Learning campaign. Together for Learning will ensure quality education for all. It builds on Canada's proven leadership in international development and education. Education and lifelong learning that is equitable, inclusive, gender responsive, conflict sensitive, and locally driven. Over the next 3 years, through programming excellence, the Refugee Education Council, diplomatic engagement, and data collection and analysis, we hope to be able to move quickly and effectively to meet the education needs of the millions of children living in countries facing humanitarian crises. Together for Learning will strengthen partnerships and unite global stakeholders, governments, communities, and youth to ensure we do not lose hard-won gains in education. It will also amplify local voices through the Refugee Education Council so that solutions and approaches are shaped by the knowledge and experience of youth, teachers, and parents from the Global South. We all have a job to do, advocates and civil society stakeholders, local and national governments, and multilateral partners to support the 4 pillars of the campaign and ensure its success. And I look forward to working with all of you in partnership. None of us here today are willing to accept a future that leaves any children and their potential behind. The work that we are embarking on is essential for the world's most vulnerable and marginalized children, for their families and communities, and for the future we share together. Many thanks to all of you for your commitment to the world's most vulnerable and marginalized children. Through your commitment to Together for Learning, you are helping to build a future of hope and possibility. Thank you.